Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the incredible benefits of breathing through your nose and the effect of nose breathing on trunk stability. As we go through the presentation today, please feel free to just toss your comments in the chat. I'm happy with you just asking questions as we go. So first of all, just a little bit about me. I'm a registered kinesiologist, a certified strength and conditioning specialist with the NSCA, a certified personal trainer with CPTN, and a yoga teacher with CPTN as well. I'm a certified nutritional practitioner. I went to the Institute for Holistic Nutrition in North York and Mississauga. A little bit of background, I was an Ontario Kinesiology Association board member for over 10 years, from about 1997 to 2007, right at the point where we became regulated as kinesiologists. So that was a pretty interesting experience, a lot of years in the making. And I'm also appointed an educational influential with the Institute for Work and Health here in Toronto since 2006. I've recently migrated from a full-time practice with clients to working solely online, mostly online, with my company First Line Education. The clients that I used to work with, though, were clients that had several autoimmune diseases all at the same time. So a typical client for me, one of the ones that comes to mind, is someone who had lupus, she had early stage multiple sclerosis, diabetes, osteoarthritis, and all that was combined and managed, so to speak, with about 14 different medications. So these are the complex clients that I used to love to work with, but they can become very tiresome and very, very draining. So I've slowly migrated everything online with my education company. The education company First Line is a company that offers courses for movement therapists, and this is for any professional that has movement in their scope of practice. Our clients and students range from new grads to one of our current mentorship students who graduated with me way back in, never mind. Our courses and programs range from kinesiology exam prep through to intro to professional practice courses to our 90-day clinical practice mentorship program. We have webinars and webinar series about breathing like this one, fascinating facts about fascia. We just wrapped up a series this afternoon. And in development, we've been asked to put together a webinar series about energy meridians, chakras, anatomy trains, and nervous system regulation. So we're going to work on putting together all of that into one series. This fall, we're going to be introducing courses about holistic nutrition and mental health, anatomy and physiology refresher, a couple of updated professional practice courses, and then a course covering pre and post hip and knee replacement. We've just had a really interesting request from students in our mentorship program. They're looking for a mastermind or an accelerator program. Many of the students have resigned from their jobs very recently, within the last 2 to 3 weeks, because their return to practice has not been simple. And so they have these ideas in the back of their minds that they want to develop into a webinar series, a program, or a series of programs for clients. And we've been able to help them bring those to reality in a number of cases. So we're just going to branch that out a little bit further. And then lastly, we host other healthcare professionals on our platform with webinars, courses, or programs that they want to deliver, but they don't want to have to deal with the tech. So we'll do that for you. And if there's anyone interested in perhaps working with us to do that, just let me know privately, and we can get that going for you. So today we're going to be talking about interesting facts about breathing. I'm hoping to pique your curiosity and perhaps blow your mind about a few things about breathing through your nose that you may not have realized before. We'll also talk about why nose breathing is really important right now as we move through this COVID-19 situation. We're going to look at the connections between breathing, digestive health, and our immune system. And then finally, we're going to practice some breathing exercises together. So just as a way of opening up things for today, this sounds kind of trite, but very, very true. To breathe means to live, and to live means to breathe. And this was from Sri Swami Vishnu Devananda in 1960. So the connections between breathing and life from the inside out is well known. And we've just not been paying attention to this for a long time. We know a lot more about the COVID-19 virus than we ever expected to know and understand 3 or 4 months ago. Right now, what we know is that the virus looks for ACE2 receptors in our body. And nitric oxide acts as a natural blocker to ACE2 receptors. So if we have nitric oxide present in the body, then we can block the virus from entering into the cell, and we prevent the COVID-19 from actually taking over. With lack of movement, so physical movement and anxiety, fear, uncertainty, also grief, so emotional aspects, leading to holding or guarding or armoring of our body, so not being able to move the body very well and breathe easily because our rib cage is kind of trapped by all of this guarding and protection. We're not able to breathe well. When we're not breathing well, we're not generating nitric oxide through the nasal cavities here, and therefore that nitric oxide isn't able to block those ACE2 receptors. So what we do know is that improper breathing patterns actually leads to lower levels of carbon dioxide. It leads to not having enough nitric oxide in the body, and therefore we're not able to block the virus, and we're not able to dilate blood vessels with carbon dioxide and nitric oxide in order to help us manage the stress of not only contracting the disease itself, but all of the other knock-on effects of isolation and social distancing or physical distancing that we've been dealing with so far. So did you know that humans are the only animals that can consciously control their breathing? Most people are chronic hyperventilators or overbreathers. Most people don't realize that they predominantly breathe through their mouths, and that we generally have a low tolerance to carbon dioxide. We can't effectively use the oxygen that we're actually inhaling. So most people, as you'll see in a minute, are lifting their rib cage with their neck muscles and with the muscles in the upper back. They're not using the muscles around the torso, primarily the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, assisted by our abdominal muscles to widen the rib cage and actually allow the diaphragm to pull oxygen into the lungs, and actually then to allow transversus abdominis, assisted by the other stomach muscles, to let air actually escape. So we think we need more oxygen in our bodies, but actually what we need, as I explained, was the generation of nitric oxide in the nasal cavities, and then a higher amount of carbon dioxide. And when we don't have enough carbon dioxide, this is when the problem starts. So did you also know that our heart rate increases when we inhale and that it decreases when we exhale, which I thought was kind of cool. So that's called heart rate variability. It's very much a measure of good health. So if you have a lot of heart rate variability, that's a good thing because it means that the heart is increasing in its pace and decreasing in its pace as we breathe. And then if we have heart rate variabilities that are very, very slight or non-existent, usually that's a sign of illness. So just an interesting little anecdote that I didn't know about before. So that the other thing that I found really fascinating is carbon dioxide is a really powerful hormone in the body. It's the chief hormone in the body. It's the only one that's produced by every tissue and probably acts on every organ. So we've known this since 1940, probably before, and yet we've never really talked about training breathing and training it together with trunk stabilizing exercises in order to maximize dilation of blood vessels and actually maximize the modulation of the nervous system. So the diaphragm is pretty cool. As we breathe, we affect the autonomic nervous system, we affect blood flow, muscle tension, and nutrient production, as well as utilization of those nutrients at a cellular level. So in 1922, this statement was really profound. Diaphragmatic breathing or rhythmical breathing is the secret to controlling the nervous system. And we still haven't really made that connection long term. It's not part of our physical practices as healthcare pros. It's not something we usually work on with clients necessarily. So our diaphragm, we know that it has a huge physiological influence on the mind and body. It's innervated by the vagus nerve. The phrenic nerve is the nerve that stimulates us to breathe. And the responsiveness to sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems is very much controlled by the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a huge muscle. It can be strengthened. It has a number of fascial attachments to all kinds of other muscles and other bony structures in the body. It contracts on the inhale and it has an elastic recoil on the exhale. So when we look at the mechanics of breathing, we know here that the inhale happens as the diaphragm contracts like a dome, and that increases the volume of the thoracic cavity. So you can take a look here at the image on the right side. And then also what happens on the inhale is the pelvic floor muscles contract as well. So we have this greater pressure against the rib cage, and that's why we see, or we should see, the rib cage expanding all the way around. And then when we exhale, the diaphragm and the pelvic floor actually just recoil. So they just relax. And it's the transversus abdominis, which is the primary muscle that helps with the exhale. And it's assisted by internal and external obliques. And those contract with help of the erector spinae and quadratus lumborum. And when we're exhaling, we can see in the diagram on the left side that the abdominal cavity capacity increases. So any questions so far? Is everyone good? No comments? No, oh my gosh, wow, that's fascinating.
There is a question in the chat, actually.
I'll just call that up here. Okay, Alana says, I understand in general that breathing well or efficiently helps our immune system. Do you have a scientific source that said it would actually block the virus? Yes, there's lots of sources. It's just physiology. It's not something that we actually need to study. It's kind of a fact that the ACE2 receptors are where the virus actually attaches. So I can grab some scientific references for you, but it has been widely published that that's the receptor and that takes it into the cell. So blocking that receptor with the nitric oxide means, of course, that the virus can't get at that receptor any longer. So yeah, I'll take a look for that and I'll make sure that everyone gets that reference. Any other questions? We're okay so far? Okay. So Buckminster Fuller says, the more we learn, the more we realize how little we know. Buckminster Fuller was a very prolific architect, kind of a Renaissance man like Da Vinci. He came up with the tensegrity medicine model of looking at the fascia in the body as a tensegrity structure. And so that's been something that we've used a lot in our fascial training. And so the person really that's been responsible for a lot of our understanding of breathing has been Dr. Constantine Buteyko. He came up with 6 breathing exercises primarily to treat asthmatics. And he was Ukrainian, and he just passed away in the early 2000s. What he believed and was able to prove was that carbon dioxide levels, when they are low, are the root causes of many diseases. So the main causes of low carbon dioxide in the body is that overbreathing and also the Bohr effect, not having enough carbon dioxide in the system to allow oxygen to be properly extracted from hemoglobin. So just to go into that Bohr effect a little bit more, in 1904, it was Christian Bohr, a Danish physicist, who said that bringing in a greater volume of air doesn't actually help us out. It actually restricts the body's ability to extract that oxygen from hemoglobin and use it in the body. So unless we have a high tolerance to carbon dioxide and high levels of carbon dioxide in the body all the time, we're not able to use the oxygen that we're bringing in. And the body enters a state of acidosis. And in this acid state, that's where disease actually starts to flourish. So then talking about hyperventilation or overbreathing, I've seen numbers in studies that actually show that 95 to 98% of the population are hyperventilators. It's incredible. So our lungs were not designed to store air. The amount of air that we breathe in is about the same amount of air that we breathe out. When we exhale a large volume of air, this means that too much carbon dioxide is actually lost from the alveoli. And with conditions like asthma, the body manages to defend itself against further losses of CO2 by just constricting everything. And that makes it even more difficult to bring air in because all of a sudden our blood vessels are smaller. So this means that we get less air in and we're able to extract less oxygen. So it becomes this cycle that you notice when you think about asthmatics, is that real difficulty trying to draw air into the lungs. So when we breathe too much, as I mentioned, the pH in the blood changes quite a bit. We have smooth muscle that constricts, leading to broncho and angiospasms. We have the Bohr effect, so carbon dioxide is not present in the body and we end up with hypoxia, not enough oxygen in the cell. We have inflammation, which occurs with hypoxia, an increased secretion of mucus to try and help with the movement of oxygen. Enzymes, proteins, antibodies, and lipid metabolism is disturbed. So our whole gut health now starts to really change. You can imagine what would happen with the brain when we're hypoxic. Metabolism is then impaired. We have this overexcitation of our nervous system and end up with hormone deficiencies. So when CO2 is chronically low, so it's low over time, what happens is the respiratory center in the brain, which is called the central chemoreceptor, it stimulates us to breathe. It monitors our level of O2, but more importantly, it's the CO2 level in the blood that it responds to. So it operates like a thermostat. When our CO2 is too low, we breathe less in order to build up that carbon dioxide. When CO2 is too high, we breathe more to get rid of carbon dioxide. But the reverse is also true. If we breathe less, we have more CO2 available to us, which is what we want to be able to use that oxygen extraction from hemoglobin more efficiently. If we breathe more, we're blowing off CO2. We don't have enough in the body. So this is the condition we actually want, is lower breathing, less breaths per minute in order to let carbon dioxide build up so that all those physiological processes can happen. What happens though is that when we breathe more than we need to over days and over months and over years, that central chemoreceptor resets and it starts to think that that chronic low level of CO2 is the norm. And that's where we start to have a problem. We have to actually start retraining that carbon dioxide tolerance to reset that central chemoreceptor again. So how are we doing so far? Any questions about the CO2 and O2 balance and how that works? Everybody's okay? So Constantine Buteyko says, we need to eat less, we need to breathe less, we need to sleep less, and physically work harder to sweat of one's brow because this is a good thing. It's a fundamental change. This is a fundamental change. This is true restructuring. This is what we need to do these days. So when we correct our breathing, a whole host of things happen. We can lower systemic inflammation. We lower our susceptibility to autoimmune disease. We are likely eating less because we have better blood sugar regulation. We're sleeping less because we're actually more efficient. And we just have this clear head and this ability to focus like never before. So there's no downside. So disordered breathing concerns. Here are all the things that will happen as you become a disordered breather or if disordered breathing persists. So hyperventilation we talked about, paradoxical breathing where we're breathing through the upper body as opposed to using the diaphragm and moving through the rib cage, audible breathing, these loud breathers, thoracic breathers again so that they're really working with the chest to breathe, people who take very deep breaths often, or big exhales you'll hear, or frequent giggling and laughing. It's very interesting that if someone is giggling and laughing all the time, it's actually the result of hyperventilation. And then mouth breathing is another disordered breathing symptom. So the grandfather of naturopathic medicine, Benedict Lust, he said that mouth breathers would waken in the morning with an open, dry mouth, foul-smelling breath, persistent hoarseness, sometimes headaches, and a loss of appetite. Yuck. So if we actually start to work on breathing better through the nose and not breathing through the mouth, then this is going to turn around an awful lot of things in terms of our comfort levels. And you could see there our sleep too. So how to spot a mouth breather? Mouth breathers will commonly have dry lips. You know, the people that are constantly putting on lip balm or applying lipstick over and over again. They'll have very contracted faces and crowded teeth. They'll often have nasal congestion, so they'll be kind of sniffing in through their nose a lot, or they will just be blowing their nose often to try and get rid of that congestion. And the best time to watch somebody while they are, if you want to see if they're a mouth breather, is to watch them when they don't know that you're watching them. And of course, that they are intensely concentrating. So maybe in the middle of a Netflix binge, that was hard to say, or when they're reading, or when they're really fascinated watching someone else speak. So now everyone's closing their mouth like a fly trap. So when you mouth breathe at night, you could snore, you could have sleep apnea. Apparently I have sleep apnea. I did a sleep test recommended by my dentist, this really interesting portable, it's like a Holter monitor that you just put on, and it has the tubes that go just into the entrance of your nose, the tubes loop over your over your ears, and you have this waist pack on, and it collects heart rate, it collects O2 and CO2 measures, and it shows your brain waves. So it shows your O2 and CO2 usage through the night. It's really fascinating. So I could see that I actually stopped breathing at different times during the night. And my partner tells me I don't snore. He doesn't catch me gasping for air the way you might think about someone with sleep apnea. But apparently I have sleep apnea, which answers a whole host of other questions. So this dentist, a holistic dentist, has recommended craniofacial therapy to actually change the facial structure. And when I look at the mirror, or when you're looking at me now, you can actually see that my face is not symmetrical at all. I do have a deviated septum that I've tried to correct twice with surgery. Of course, it won't work because I wasn't breathing properly. The bones of my face have shifted and contracted as a result. And I've now realized that there's no way I could get any corrective dentistry done until I fix the bones, the position of the bones in my face, do breathing training regularly in order to make sure that those changes stay in place. And only then would I have more corrective dentistry. So pretty fascinating. I can't even be a patient for this dentist until I do all this treatment. So the significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking with which we created them. So exactly what I was saying, we can't actually treat a lot of these conditions, disease conditions, sleep disturbances, until we get to the root cause, which is actually the breathing. And going through nutrition school for 2 years, I didn't learn about breathing. I didn't learn that breathing through the nose would actually have such a knock-on effect to pathology, to managing the nervous system, managing our ability to move and to stabilize through the trunk. So it's pretty fascinating. So question for you, just toss this in the chat for me. What is one characteristic of someone who's hyperventilating? One of the things you might see that would tip you off. Nobody, no guesses at all. When you think about a hyperventilator, what would you see? You might see someone who is actually lifting their chest. Yep, frequent giggling or laughing. Thanks, Karen. You might think of someone who was snoring, someone who had sleep apnea, someone who would talk a lot because that's just how they breathe. They take air in and they take air in through their mouths as they're talking. So just a comment, another comment here from Alana. Sorry, I missed this before. This is the first time I've heard the diaphragm is innervated by the vagus nerve. It does travel through the esophageal hiatus of the diaphragm, but I wasn't aware of it actually innervating the diaphragm. Can I provide a source? Well, an anatomy book would give you a source for that. The vagus nerve is the wandering nerve. And so it's one of those nerves that touches on all of these different organ systems. So the phrenic nerve is for breathing. The phrenic nerve stimulates the breathing cycle. The vagus nerve is actually innervating the diaphragm, the muscle itself. Thank you. Good question. So we're going to give this a try for a moment here. I want you to measure your respiratory rate. Then I'm going to show you how to clear your sinuses with a very interesting nose clearing exercise. I'm going to take you through some slow, shallow breathing and show you some reduced breathing and some mini pauses. So this will be a little bit of a break for you and wake you up just a little bit here after a long day of listening to lectures so far. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to put a minute on the clock here. And I want you to get comfortable. And I want you to start to, when I say go, I want you to just track your breathing rate. And what I'm going to ask you to do is just track how many breaths you take in a minute. And then I'll tell you what's normal. And we'll just see what happens. We'll see what the findings are for you. Okay, so you can close your eyes if you like. I can't see you, so don't worry. Close your eyes if you like. Close your mouth. And then I just want you to start breathing quietly. Okay, ready? All right, go ahead. Start to count your breaths. A minute is such a long time when there's a timer on. So you're only halfway through. Okay, you can stop counting. So in the chat here, how many breaths per minute did you have? 11, okay. 8, 10, 5. Not bad, not bad at all. 9, 6, okay. Interesting, right? Quite a range. What would you say is normal? What's your guess? Someone who's in very good health, how many breaths per minute would they have? Exactly. Karen, good job. So 6 to 8 breaths per minute is normal. Now, if someone was really ill, so they had a chronic autoimmune disease, how many breaths do you think they would have per minute? What's your guess? Give me a range, what you think you'd see. Any idea? So we know it's going to be higher, right? You might be amazed to know that when people are ill, their respiratory rate increases to 15 to 18 breaths per minute. It's incredible. So the more ill they are, the more frequently they breathe. So you actually train breathing. And as I mentioned before, you have a significant effect on the expression of that illness, which I think is really cool. Those studies have been widely published. And it's phenomenal to see how many studies have been done increasing carbohydrate tolerance. We'd all love that. Carbon dioxide tolerance, and watching the effect on disease states. So now nose clearing. Yeah, Tamara says 15, exactly. So nose clearing. Okay, so you ready for another one? It's a good thing people can't see you. What you're going to do here is to clear the sinuses anytime you like. This is a great idea. What you do is you inhale gently. On your exhale, plug your nose when you're finished. Nod your head 5 to 8 times up and down. And then just let your fingers go. Have a normal inhale. Is it any clearer? If it isn't, try one more time. So you're going to inhale gently, exhale gently, close your nose with your fingertips, and then just nod your head and don't breathe. It's pretty neat. So that's one of the techniques taught in the Buteyko breathing program, which is really cool. If you don't notice as much of an effect there, then what you can do is walk and do that head nodding at the same time. Just don't bump into anything. And you'll actually notice that the tipping of the head up and down starts to change the circulation of that nitric oxide. And that helps to start to increase carbon dioxide tolerance because you've stopped breathing as well. And you'll notice dilation. And that's what happens when you stop breathing, even for those few seconds, is dilation and better circulation. So we want to make sure that we're quiet, shallow breathers. Most of us breathe far too deeply. So what I want you to do is just for another minute or so, and I won't time you, but just try and get quiet. Close your mouth as I'm talking, and just try and breathe very lightly, very shallowly. Relax your neck and shoulders, and just sit quietly and breathe. So this is what that meditative breathing is all about, focusing on the breath in and out through the nose, very light, very shallow. Think about breathing in an ellipse pattern. So you kind of smoothing the edges between inhale and exhale. And then you may also try and breathe much more slowly to reduce your breathing a little bit. And you won't be able to do that if you're nervous or you're excited or you're in the middle of changing tasks. But when you get quiet, this is something you can do. You can actually gently work on increasing your carbon dioxide tolerance and reduce your breathing rate. The next thing that you can do to start to improve your tolerance to carbon dioxide is just pausing after your exhale, just for a few seconds. And I don't advise you doing this exercise for very long. These are mini pauses. If you have any health conditions, be very careful. You may only want to pause for a few seconds, nothing drawn out. These are all the exercises that would be very safe for us as healthcare practitioners to recommend, unless you've been trained in the Buteyko exercise series of 6, where you can work with people who are quite ill. So this is as far as we can go, just a little bit of a pause at the end of our exhale. Okay, so any questions at all about those brief breathing exercises and strategies? Everyone's pretty good? Yeah, okay. So now we look at the connection between breathing, nourishment, and fascial health. This is where we'll talk about trunk stability. So we know that many muscles contribute to our trunk or our core strength. The coordination of these muscles, as I mentioned before, this is where the core stability comes in. So for the mini pause, we recommend usually, I would say 5-ish seconds, 4 or 5 seconds, nothing very long. So this is just mild, it's just easy, nothing prolonged. The breathing training courses, we actually train to up to 75 to 90 seconds. So I'm going into a Buteyko breathing educators course out west later in the summer. We can't get into the course unless we can demonstrate that we have a controlled pause of 35 seconds. So we don't teach that to our clients. We teach them, maybe a 5-second pause, 4 or 5-second pause, but to actually train carbon dioxide, I don't know why I'm having a problem with that today. When we're training that longer pause, we're going up to 75 seconds is where we're actually going to be coming out of that training. So that'll be kind of cool. So for trunk stability, you can see that if we're better breathers, if we're breathing through the nose and we are getting proper oxygen circulation to all the tissues, we're getting proper nutrient supply to all the tissues, and we're able to breathe while we move arms and legs under load, this is where our trunk stability comes from. So one of the things I remember doing in Stu McGill's lab, because I just used to hang out there, was he loved to have us practice spinning on the ergo bikes that were there and then jump down into a side plank. And he was looking at muscle function. He wasn't studying breathing though. And it was so cool that now I think back to that and think, I don't think my mouth was closed at that stage. If I closed my mouth, I probably would be more stable, even though I was really using my rib cage. So my diaphragm and pelvic floor were super busy, as was my other trunk muscles. And I think I would be able to exercise or hold that position much better if I had my mouth closed, a higher carbohydrate tolerance, carbon dioxide tolerance, and I must be hungry. I know I'm not hungry. I didn't have any carbs for lunch. That's probably part of the reason, or enough carbs for lunch. So this is where the trunk stability comes in. If we're able to teach our clients, close your mouths when you exercise. If you need to open your mouth, you're exerting yourself too hard. You need to slow up, train yourself to keep your mouth closed. Then you'll notice that you will all of a sudden be breathing better. And in a very short time, it's a matter of days, you return to your previous training level and you'll notice that you're actually stronger. That's going to be what we want to happen. And that's where we are going to definitely improve trunk stability. So trunk stability also talks a lot about how we're holding ourselves, how we're aware of our bodies and our emotions, how we generate movements and patterns of movement, and then of course how we train these movements with endurance, strength, speed, and agility. So if we have uninterrupted blood flow, if we are able to have very good carbon dioxide and oxygen cooperation and collaboration, we have very good glide of fascia under the skin. We have all the trunk muscles readily available. We can actually make sure that they're innervated well. We can activate them well. We can maintain contraction of them under loads and over time. And then we can actually allow those muscles to fully relax because our nervous systems are allowing our bodies to let go. We've got a very good balance of sympathetic and parasympathetic collaboration. We're not in that sympathetic state all the time. And we actually can maximize our ability to move. So one of the movement pattern trainings that I love is ballet. So here I am, I'm the second one from the left here at the National Ballet School. And this is Ballet Bob, our famous teacher who heads up the adult ballet program at the National Ballet School. And these are three of my clients. And we just got together and we're doing ballet here 1 or 2 evenings a week for the last number of years. And what I learned was as we work through these different ballet exercises, we've got this wonderful glide of fascia under the skin. We have to keep our mouths closed because Ballet Bob does not allow mouths hanging open when we're practicing to be these ballerinas we will never become. And the movements are smoother. We're able to transition between movements much better. And you feel fantastic because you've been breathing wonderfully for 90 minutes. So it's just a wonderful way of starting to incorporate breathing into activity. So I've talked a little bit about coordinating breathing with movement and stability of the trunk. And one of the ways that we can actually reduce our nervous system stimulation, primarily sympathetic nervous system stimulation, and so we can downregulate, that is the sympathetic nervous system, and upregulate the parasympathetic nervous system, is to get our heads down below our hearts. So you'll know in yoga, there's a lot of alternating positions where there's head down and head up, during the sun salutations. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so effective for relaxing our bodies. Also, using yoga again as an example, we have this beautiful pattern of inhalation and exhalation where we're moving and cued to inhale and exhale with certain movements. And so our body starts to relax as breathing becomes part of the movement. So as I was mentioning to you before, when we're exercising, we should have our mouths closed. We should be able to exercise at all intensities with our mouths closed. When we're speaking, we want to be breathing in through our nose and speaking out of our mouth. So you just kind of sip the air, you just have a little bit of an inhale, and then you're talking through the mouth, inhaling through the nose and talking out of the mouth. And this took me a little bit of time to learn. It's called breathing like the Queen. So what I was doing is breathing in far too deeply. And it took me a little while to learn that you just inhale a little bit and exhale as you're talking. So that could be something that you practice. So another question for you. What is the nerve responsible for modulating our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems? And you've heard this before. It's a very popular wandering nerve. Nobody in the chat? No one's got an answer for this one? You've forgotten already? You're practicing your breathing? Vagus nerve, absolutely. So the vagus nerve is such a critical nerve. It's responsible for this variability in our nervous systems, contraction or innervation of a lot of different muscles and organs through the center of the body. And breathing is the very best way to modulate that nerve and therefore affect our nervous systems. So does anyone have any questions? I really kind of blasted through that. So if anyone has any comments or questions or any discussion that you'd like to bat around, we can do that. Nobody? Everybody's pretty happy with everything we've gone through. So today we talked about interesting facts about breathing. At least I think they were pretty interesting. Why nose breathing is really important. So even though we're wearing masks, we should be keeping our mouths closed in order to make sure that our nose can filter for any bacteria, viruses, parasites, dirt, to make sure that doesn't get into the lungs and ultimately into our bloodstream. We talked about the connections between breathing and our nervous system. We talked about how movement increases the delivery of nitric oxide, carbon dioxide, and oxygen with that interplay of the three. We looked at how our breathing can really influence our trunk stability. And with exercise with our mouth closed, we get this beautiful excursion of the rib cage because we have a nice collaboration of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, as well then with the transversus abdominis is the primary muscle for exhalation. And then we also have the bigger abdominal muscles and erector spinae and quadratus lumborum that help to assist with those muscles for exhalation. And then we went through a whole range of breathing exercises there just to talk a little bit more about breathing regulation so that you know that all of this is very, very easy to do. And that for those of you who have challenges with snoring at night or possibly sleep apnea that you know of or not, one of the other things that we teach in the Buteyko program is to actually use tape. And so we recommend that people will be taping their mouths with medical tape, just that soft medical tape. They tape over their mouths during the day first, so that encourages only breathing through the nose. And you can mumble around the tape, not advisable on a webinar, but you can mumble around the tape, so you can leave it on all day. And then when that's feeling comfortable, you actually leave that tape on overnight. It holds your lips closed, so you're forced to breathe through the nose. And you will find, if you try this, that you sleep a lot more soundly and you wake up feeling a lot more refreshed and you wake up having had less sleep, but you feel great. So that's another thing that we recommend to clients. And it's a very slow progression. You're not speeding up that tape, meaning that you tape during the day for half a day and you're right into taping at night right away. It's a process that you go through over a number of days, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. So takeaways for today, we should always be nose breathing. We need to be breathing through our nose when we're awake, when we're asleep, when we're exercising. Breathe in and out through the nose, regardless of what you're doing. Aim for quiet, shallow, and breathing and not hyperventilation. Move in a mindful and controlled way to down-regulate your nervous system back from that sympathetic fight, flight, or freeze state to parasympathetic, which would be the rest and digest system. And then focus on your breathing, on rhythmical movement, or other activities while you're concentrating on that shallow breathing in the background to help to tame your monkey mind. And one of the wonderful ways in, again, to the nervous system, whether you are simply relaxing or meditating or moving, is to make sure that you keep your mouth closed as you breathe. So if you'd like some take-home tips, I have a few things that you might find helpful. I have a breathing checklist that has a whole bunch of reminders on it. It's called Shut Your Mouth. And then I also put together 4 exercises where you can actually train diaphragmatic breathing. And this will help to strengthen the huge muscle that is your diaphragm in a variety of different positions, which are very interesting. When you strengthen the diaphragm and therefore strengthen the pelvic floor, that's the root of core stability or trunk stability. So we always start with training the diaphragm before we train side bridges or planks or Spider-Mans or whatever it happens to be. This is where we start, always with breathing. And the other thing that will happen is you start to focus on keeping your mouth closed and doing the diaphragmatic exercises, is you'll be increasing your CO2 tolerance, offloading oxygen that much more easily, which really helps you to feel better. So if you'd like those freebies, just shoot me an email and just say webinar freebies so I catch it really quickly, and I'll just send those over to you. So I want to thank you very much for hanging out with me today. Here's a whole bunch of different ways that you can reach me anytime. And it was great talking at you. Thank you very much for your participation in the chat. And if you have any other questions, just as we're wrapping up here, go ahead and just throw them in the chat or feel free to contact me later. Thanks very much.
Hey, thank you, Angela. So we do still have a few minutes left. So if anyone does have any questions, please don't hesitate, put them in the chat. And Angela's already put up all of her contact information if you want to speak to her later. This was really great. I mean, I could listen to you talk all day, and I think Mark is already looking for tape to tape my mouth shut. So thank you.
A good resource. Alana, thanks very much. I will just copy that and I'll take a look at that. Thanks very much. If anyone is interested in resources about breathing, again, just shoot me a message. There's a ton of them out there about research, and it's going to become quite a hot topic in the next little while in terms of putting a lot more data around these different techniques.